Great. And we're live. Welcome, everybody, to this remote interview. My name is Lisette, and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today I have on the line, all the way from Zagreb, Croatia, Nenad Maljkovic. You're going to have
Maljkovic, that's right.
Now I have being John Malkovich in my head, so that's why I said it's spelled similarly. And Nenad, you are a cultural creative, a network entrepreneur, and a permaculture designer. So we are going to get into that. Very interesting. But I want to start with the first question, which is, what does your virtual office look like? And what do you need to get your work done?
Well, my virtual office is actually not an office. It's my living room most of the time. And sometimes I use nearby a co-working space, which is Impact Hub Zagreb.
Ah, okay.
It's actually just a 10-minute walk from here, and it's very convenient. So sometimes I work at home alone, sometimes I'm there with people.
And do you just need a laptop and an internet connection, or do you have any special tools that you use?
I have a laptop which is actually quite old because I like to keep my things longer in function, and I do need a webcam because I have external webcams that I need to connect to laptop to work.
It's that old.
Yes, it's actually quite a good and very good webcam, and yes, basically that's it. With the internet connection, I can work from anywhere. Yeah, this is also useful.
The headphones.
Yeah.
Indeed. I think they're very useful. I like having the sound close to my ears, so that's why I use it.
Oh,
so,
yeah, I can hear definitely better like this.
Yeah, and there's less background noise for the people listening. So another great remote working tip. You heard it here. So I want to ask, what kind of work do you do at home versus at the co-working space? Is there a specific kind of work that you do, or is it just you feel like being around people, so you're around people?
Well, this also, but at co-working space, sometimes I have meetings, which are often face-to-face meetings with people, and sometimes blended meetings. That means part of us are meeting in the room, face-to-face, and part of us are joining online. So we actually do quite a lot of these blended meetings, as we call it.
Okay.
And the type of work I do is, I guess mostly about communicating and discussing things with people, agreeing, writing it down somehow, and then following up on that.
Yeah, that's kind of the standard. That's what we do. Everybody does in general. But let's talk about your work, because cultural creative, network entrepreneur, and permaculture designer. Let's start with permaculture designer, because I don't know what that is.
Well, permaculture, I like to explain it in 3 levels. First level is somewhat technical and similar to, for example, architecture. It's a system of holistic design. So with permaculture, you actually design sustainable systems. And system can be your household or your neighborhood or some agriculture production or some industrial production. Anything that people do at any kind of level of organization can be designed in a way that it is more in line with nature and sustainable. So that's permaculture. The second level of permaculture, if I may explain,
please, that's
all 3 levels. The second level is probably social movement. It was started in end of 70s, 80s. By a couple of permaculture pioneers in Australia. Bill Mollison, he was one of the fathers of permaculture. He died last year, unfortunately. And this was designed in a way that permaculture spreads all over the world through 10-day, more or less 10-day or 2-week intense education about principles and ethics of permaculture and how to apply it in designing the sustainable systems. And ethics of permaculture is actually very, very simple and easy to grasp. It's earth care, people care, and fair shares.
Okay.
basic principles of permaculture. And the third level of permaculture is what I call a lifestyle. There are more and more people worldwide quite aware of the planetary boundaries, and people choose to live differently. So that's a permanent culture or permaculture lifestyle.
Super interesting. I haven't actually heard of it, but I'm assuming that your team works together remotely.
Yes, well, permaculture practitioners and one of the spin-offs from permaculture transition activists. We are all over the world, and we usually do some projects that are very local on street, neighborhood, village, town level. But we also need to collaborate beyond that scale. So we connect as virtual teams worldwide. So
then you have to have local teams actually affecting the change locally, but then you're also collaborating globally with other people doing the same thing in their local areas.
Yes, this is actually how change happens.
Totally.
You do it locally where you live, and thousands and hundreds of thousands local projects can produce a global systemic change. And
totally.
for that, we need to collaborate beyond our local projects. And
right.
Because more and more people either choose not to travel because they are needed in their local communities or local projects, or they simply don't want to travel because travel is actually quite toxic for the environment. So this remote collaboration tools, which are enabled by internet, are actually next best thing to face-to-face meetings and travel. So that's
I love it. So the actual being remote is sort of part of the permaculture values in some ways, because it's more green. Instead of traveling, we're just pushing buttons in some ways.
Yeah,
is that a stretch?
Yeah, you are right. But we have also challenges around that. Because not very many permaculture people like to spend time online.
Okay.
We tend to spend time outdoors doing real life work. Many of us are involved in permaculture, in agriculture, in forest gardening, etc. So actually, this is quite new. Remote collaboration is still emerging as a set of skills for permaculture and transition people, I would say.
I can imagine that this is very similar to many other groups out there, which is that a lot of people don't like to spend so much time online. So yes, online collaboration is great, but what happens if you don't know the tools, or you'd rather be outside, or I can imagine. So yeah, that's a challenge that I think that other people share as well. How do you get around that so far?
Well, my first thinking around this topic was in 2014 when we joined from Croatia international transition network project that was called the Reconomy. It is still ongoing, and we joined first 5 international. We joined as a national group, first group of 5 national hubs in that project, and we did some things locally, learning about local and community-led economic development projects. We all organized local events, but during that project we stayed in touch. We had regular video meetings. And actually this group, through that way of collaboration, learned how to do it quite well. And later on, what became apparent is that a lot of us are actually struggling with this type of collaboration. There is a lot of stress involved somehow. There is also this information overload, or what I call elsewhere overload, involved, and it seemed to me at the time that somehow we need to make it comfortable for ourselves so that we can use it more. So I start talking with people and discovering how exactly we could make it comfortable for ourselves. And what we kind of choose was that let's support each other in learning. So that's how we started.
Okay. So yeah, I'm curious because you're saying you're really struggling to find a way to make it comfortable for yourselves. So you supported each other in what way? How did you do it? What were some of the ways in which you made it more comfortable?
One approach was what I called the people-centered approach. We actually became quite aware that when people start talking which tool is better, it actually destroys team spirit and collaboration. This fight, is this tool right for us or that tool is right for us? So we said, let's stop talking about tools and let's talk about our needs. And what we did, we actually figured out who's using what within the group, and found out which are the tools that most of the people use, and that's what we took as a starting point. So if it was a Google Docs, it was Google Docs. If it was Skype, it was Skype, or it was I don't know, email, it was email. But we started with what everybody knows how to use. And when we became comfortable with that, we then introduced some new tools. So this was one approach.
That is a great tip. Which start with what everyone knows how to use.
Yes.
And then grow out from there. Great tip.
Yes, because there is no learning curve in that. And the other thing, what we did was when we wanted to look at some other tools, we did something which is called plus minus interesting analysis, which is analysis methodology or template or pattern we learned from permaculture. So we don't just jump on a new tool. We do this plus minus interesting analysis, take a whole picture, take a step back, think about it, and then we decide what to use.
Awesome. And go ahead.
Yeah, and then we support each other in learning how to use it.
So you help each other. If somebody's really struggling, there's always somebody there to say, okay, let me give you a quick demo on how.
It's not only about that. Sometimes people, first of all, you need to know that most of our teams are volunteers, not professionals.
Okay.
We are collaborating as volunteers. And we all know that others are busy doing their things, not only in the context of what we do together, but their life and their work, etc. And sometimes the communication was slow because people didn't want to bother others, and just making it acceptable. Please do ask what do you need, share what you don't understand. That enabled other people to help others. So this is one way to do it within a virtual team. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. In my workshop, I teach people how we call it a team agreement, and it's just outlining your ways of working. So how are you going to communicate? How do you collaborate? And where is all the information going to be stored?
Yeah, we actually figured that out eventually. But at the beginning, we were collaborating without any agreements. So that was part of the difficulties. But eventually, we started to put down this as some kind of a one-pager.
Right.
One-page table with essential agreements, which were not only about how to do meetings, but also sometimes what and how to do between meetings.
Oh, I see. Yeah, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Because then for new people that are coming in, it's very easy for them to just jump right in and kind of know what the ways are of working instead of just hanging out and figuring it out over the course of time. So you can read the one-pager and then you've got a good snapshot. And do you review this one-pager every once in a while?
Yeah. We basically... Well, this one example, I remember we just shared it as a Google Doc, and then when somebody wants an improvement, it was written down and highlighted. So we open it. If anything is highlighted, that means we need to discuss it, and if it's okay, then we remove highlight, and we still, and again, we have agreement which is updated.
Awesome. Awesome that it can happen that way. So what other, so you use Google Docs, it sounds like you use Skype. What are some of the other things that you've agreed to use?
Well, we now mostly use Zoom for video calls. We use Skype currently. Quite a lot of teams are using Skype as a chat, ongoing chat. Some teams moved to Slack. But, chat is a chat, so it can work regardless of a platform you use.
Right. So it can be tool agnostic. And I can imagine that if you have a group of volunteers that are all over the world, these are people that are just doing work in their spare time. So whereas if somebody has a team and you're hired full-time to be on that team, it's much easier because you're just sort of expected to be around. But as a volunteer, it could be anything. So how do you guys collaborate together? How do you know what each other are doing, and what's your process?
Well, we are actually still struggling quite a lot with that because in volunteer teams, communication tends to be slow, and it's by design. I mean, we just allow people more time to respond, and I think we are in most teams. We are right now trying to work it out. I personally am looking into some of the agile practices, rituals or ceremonies, how these guys are calling that. And because it seems to me that introducing those could improve collaboration even within volunteer teams. And because the rhythm tends to be slow in volunteer teams, what happens very often is that we have more need to catch up when we start communicating again. So communication gets interrupted, people forget what they were talking about, and then we need some time to catch up. So we are looking for patterns to find our way around that particular manifestation right now.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Happy Melly has the exact same challenges, and we haven't quite worked out.
Yes, and I personally believe it's a part of this elsewhere overload, because as humans, our natural way of communicating is just in our immediate environment and asynchronously. And asynchronous communication plays games with us, so it's difficult. Yeah.
Right. And there's lots of distractions that are in the way.
Oh yeah, distractions are a completely different story. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about it. What do you mean?
Well, there are distractions that are on screen, and there are distractions that are in environment.
Right.
And there is even among application designers recently more and more awareness that applications need to be designed in a way that is not distracting for people, because it's actually damaging their productivity, and maybe we can even say it's damaging for their life. So
how do you keep yourself focused?
Well, I don't have applications on my phone.
Wow.
I just stick to laptop with this. Sometimes I use, there is this Stay Focused application, which I turn on for Facebook, so I limit my time. And there is also this kill newsfeed. So when I open Facebook, it's empty. I don't have a distracting newsfeed when I'm on Facebook.
So this app actually, when you open your Facebook, it just shows an empty newsfeed.
Yes.
But then why open Facebook if you know it's going to be empty?
We use Facebook mostly for groups. And actually, Facebook groups are very, very nicely designed for team collaboration. So when I open Facebook, I just go where I want to go. I just check what I want to
I
check.
see. So it just allows you to see what's in your groups, but it just takes out the news feed so that you can go to your group, see what's going on. Brilliant app.
The newsfeed is the main source of distraction on
Oh, yeah.
Facebook. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if there's a kitten, I'm gone. It's I'm just gone.
Yeah.
Other people have different things.
I guess I do the same with electric cars or airplanes.
Okay, electric cars and airplanes. Everybody has their vice, right? We all have our distractions. Yeah, interesting. So what about virtual team management? How does that work? Because you said you're part of an association. Oh, virtual team management. And then I really want to get to the virtual team quick guide. We've got to talk about the quick guide that you wrote because it's awesome. But let's start with virtual team management. Because you've said a couple of interesting things. One is you're working for a global organization of volunteers. So how does the management work on that? And then also you're part of the Croatian Permaculture Association where you said you don't have titles. And I want to ask about management and that as well.
So we are what we call horizontal organizations or horizontal teams. That means that basically we self-organize or self-manage. We don't have most of the time we don't have hierarchical roles. We take temporary roles. Sometimes we really take time to develop those roles. Sometimes it's just generic. And because we spend quite a lot of time in meetings, because we find meetings precious for relationship development. We have standard roles for meetings, and also these roles we rotate. So this is also explained in this virtual team quick guide. We have a facilitator role, keeper of the time, keeper of the history, and keeper of the heart. So facilitators have 3 keepers to help them. And also, if there is a blended meeting, there is a 4th role, which we call a virtual host. That's a person in a room that is taking care that people online are in communication well.
I love it. Mark Kilby calls that the buddy system. So if you have like a hybrid meeting, make sure that every remote person has somebody that they're tethered to in the in-person meeting, so that if something goes wrong with the tech, they don't have to interrupt everybody. They have sort of a buddy in that meeting. Yeah,
we have one person taking care about everybody online, which can be difficult. It can be done also on one-on-one basis, but then we need more laptops in the room.
Right. Yeah, but even just one virtual host can be very useful. I mean, how many problems come up at the same time usually? I mean, usually it's manageable. So that's a great idea. I like that virtual host. Awesome tip.
Yeah, and that's also part of a virtual team quick guide. It's explained there a little bit about blended meetings.
Yeah, so let's talk about the virtual team quick guide. I've got it up here. Tell us, how did this come about? Why did you decide to write this?
So this was kind of an outcome of this struggle when I noticed that most of us, me included, have lots of stress in this area of online collaboration, and also during video calls. And that is not only because of tools we use, but partially because of lack of skills. So I started to explore this area, and actually what I found out is that corporate world is already did quite a lot of research and work and books. Of course, corporate world, they needed for globalization purposes, and they had resources to do it. So I took some time to go through a literature. And then there was this opportunity, Transition Network, a UK-based charity that initiated transition movement worldwide. They were offering some funding for different development of different resources. So I offered this as a possible project. And yeah, that's how we did it. And what I did is actually I took some, not only what I found in literature and through this research, I took some experiences I had in different teams. One was this Reconomy team which I already mentioned. The other was European Permaculture Network, Strategy and Vision Group, which was active for a couple of years. Also struggling with all these issues and also learning by doing. And yeah, so at the end, a colleague from Transition Network helped edit this guide to make it more useful. And now we are sharing it with not only within transitioners. With transitioners, we are sharing it with other similar groups that are interested.
Yeah, it's a great guide. I mean, I really like you have a series of principles for virtual working, and then it goes through and talks about the tools to use, and you give examples of tools, and how to set up virtual teams and roles and facilitators. And I mean, it's a really a thorough guide. I will definitely link to it in the show notes. One thing that I wanted to ask about it, because I, of course, am in the process of writing my book about remote teams, and there's definitely been some things that I learned through writing the book. So I wanted to ask you, what were some of the things that you learned that you really, after you write something, you really know a subject. So what did you take away from, I know I'm putting you on the spot. This wasn't one of the planned questions, but it's such a, I mean, when you write something like this, at the end, you kind of take something away from it. So what did you take away from your experience?
Well, when I wrote the first version, it was much longer.
Oh.
So as I said, a colleague from Transition Network, he helped edit it, and it is shorter now. I think that through writing this, I actually realized how, for what we do, video calls are precious. And what I realized is that video calls, seeing people on screen, is really, really important. And I realized that synchronous communication is much, much better for mutual understanding and relationship development, particularly if it's on video, but even synchronous communication that is typed, like live chat, works better than asynchronous, any form of asynchronous communication. So this is what is my personal takeaway from this process.
So interesting. Because, in the beginning, when I first entered the workforce, everything was phone calls. Like we called each other, everybody was just talking on the phone, and then became email. And email really took over all the phone calls. In the beginning, you just called people. And then there was email, and email took over all the phone calls. And then started coming the video chat and the asynchronous, even more asynchronous communications like instant messaging. I mean, they were all sort of there, but for me, that was sort of the sequence. So I kind of had the same realization about video, but I didn't connect it with synchronous chat, that even a live chat can be better than asynchronous when you're going back, when it takes a couple of hours to go back and forth with people. You're right. It's sort of unnatural for humans in a way.
Yeah, and there is this aspect that that is linked with how we function as a human beings. So if you think about it, and there is literature, of course, on that topic, both agriculture and writing were introduced to human culture more or less at the same time. And the consequence of that is our division from nature.
Yeah.
And it seems that writing somehow makes it easier for us to disconnect from nature, and oral culture, when knowledge and information is shared by speaking, particularly face to face, actually builds our connections with other people, and also builds our ability to connect with nature. People are nature as well.
Right. It's true. People are nature as well. Oh, I have so many questions for you, but we're starting to get to the end of the session. But I do want to ask, before we get to the very last question, which is an easy one, I do want to ask, what advice do you have for others who are starting out? Now that you've done this, and you're still struggling, we're all still struggling with a few things, but if there's somebody else who's starting out and with a global organization of volunteers, there are many, I'm sure, who are listening to this podcast, what advice do you have?
Oh, that's easy. Don't talk about tools. talk about how to make it enjoyable for yourself and see what tools can support that. That would be my advice.
I love it. How to make it enjoyable for yourself.
Yeah, because if it's enjoyable, then it has much better chances to be both effective and efficient.
Love it. That's a great answer. Absolutely great answer. And nobody's ever said that before. So, so that's a first. Yes. So the very last question is, what is the best way to get in touch with you to find out more? If after listening to this interview, people are like, I need to talk to this Nenad guy, how do they find you?
Yeah, I guess through Facebook. I maintain a profile on that social network, and that's the only profile I maintain. And also, if you Google virtual teams for systemic change, you will end up at my blog, which I'm not very active, but most likely I will be more and more writing and sharing on that blog.
Also, blog posts are timeless, right? So things that you've already written can, doesn't mean you have to write every week.
On that blog right now, there are more things that other people wrote, and I just copy pasted, but I also wrote some.
Great. It's a conglomeration of information. Yeah. Okay, so you said one more thing that I want to ask about. I know I said it was the last question, but now I was just curious, which is you've chosen only Facebook as a social media account to maintain. Why? Because
I don't want to maintain more than one, and most of my contacts are on Facebook.
Well, that's a good reason. I should think about that. I've got all these social networks, and it takes a long time to actually to engage with people.
Yeah, I tried Twitter for like a week, and then I said, no, I don't want that.
It's highly addicting. You made a good choice. You made a good choice. Thank you so much for your time today. Found it really valuable to talk to you, and I really look forward to sharing the virtual team guide with everybody.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for sharing the guide.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. Until next time, everybody, be powerful.
Bye.